What's up, guys? Blue Chip Sports Prep. We are going live like we do every single week. Coach Z and Coach Todd Kelly. Listen, we are breaking it down for you young student athletes to get you prepared for the next level if you so choose. So listen, we got a good topic for you today. We're going to go over highlights, why they're important, what should be in your highlights, and then also we'll talk specifically about who to share them to and where to send them to, because that's, obviously the most important thing. And so, Coach Kelly, what's going on?
Hey, not much, man. Just enjoying myself, enjoying this weather down here in Dallas. Kind of scorching hot, about 95 today. But better than being cloudy and raining and cold. So I'm happy about
it. So, did you want to take the floor to kind of get it started? We'll talk about talk about your highlights. We'll talk about what they are, what your highlights are, and why they're important. We'll start off with that.
Yeah. We just start off. Yeah, absolutely. So highlight film. Now, I tell every student athlete that's serious about being recruited, it's two things that you're going to have if you're serious about being recruited. Number one, that's a transcript, and number two, that's a highlight film. All right. So those are the two things you really need to have if you want to be recruited and if you want college coaches to take you seriously. Now, we're going to talk about the highlight part. The reason highlights are important is because obviously coaches need to be able to see you play so that they can evaluate you, so that they know if you can play at their particular level or not. And so let's kind of talk about what are some of the parameters of a highlight tape. And then Coach Z, I'll kind of let you know specifically type of, what you kind of want to talk about as far specifics. But just in terms of a highlight, it needs to be anywhere between 90 seconds and 3 minutes. All right. So 1.5 to 3 minutes. All right. You got to keep in mind, college coaches don't have time to be watching 7, 8, 10-minute highlight films when you got, 50 to 100 kids sending you highlight films every day. So between 90 seconds, and 3 minutes is a really good length for a highlight tape. Now, keep in mind in your highlight tape, let me make a clear distinction. There's a difference between a highlight tape and a mixtape. There are a lot of kids sending mixtapes, which are those tapes that are showing kids in the locker room, high-fiving their teammates and showing them in warm-ups and, kind of showing them celebrating and kind of all the pregame activity. That is completely irrelevant to college coaches. All right. That's more good for your friends and family and teammates and whatnot. But for college coaches, the only thing they care about are things that happen in between the lines under the whistle. Those are the only things that matter, in between the lines under the whistle. All right. So keep in mind, any of the highlights where you're like I said, the celebrations, the high fives, the warm-ups, all that, leave that out. All right. Completely irrelevant. So that's the first thing. Only game highlights. Second of all, you want to have highlights relevant to the position you play or what you'll be doing in college. So, for example, you may play both ways in high school. You may be a linebacker and you may be a tight end. Well, if you're going to play tight end in college, your highlight needs to have the majority of the highlights need to be with you on the offensive side playing tight end, not necessarily with you on the defensive side playing linebacker. The majority of the highlights need to be that way. Also, a lot of coaches have different opinions about this, but as far as you don't necessarily need a whole bunch of slow-mo special effects, but just make sure that you're easily identifiable, that we know, hey, we're looking at number 25 in white, number 15 in red, number 12 in black, whatever it is, whatever your number is, whatever your jersey color is, make sure that that's easily identifiable for the college coaches, because the last thing you want a coach to be doing is looking at the film and thinking, hey, who am I looking at right here? Is it this guy? Is it this guy? Is it that guy? No, they need to know exactly who they're looking at. All right. Yeah. Also, another thing with your highlights, make sure that, each clip should be maybe 5 to 7 seconds or so. Clips don't need to be 25-second clips, all right? Need to be 5 to 7, maybe 10-second clips at the most, all right? So those are a few things. And then the last thing I'll add before I turn over to you, Coach Z, is music. Yeah. Every coach has a type of music they love. Everyone loves some type of music, right? But one thing with highlight films, make sure that if you're putting music, it's best to have instrumentals. All right. You don't need words. All right. And specifically, do not have any highlights that have foul language, profanity, or anything inappropriate, because that is a very easy way to get yourself crossed off the list and get unrecruited. So make sure that if you have music, all right, make sure that if there are lyrics, that they're clean, but it's best to probably have instrumentals where there's no words at all. And also not having any music is okay as well. All right, that's okay as well to not have any music. And so those are a couple just kind of basics about film. And Coach, I'll let you kind of go into a little more specifics, and then I'll kind of add some on the back end too.
No, I think that's fantastic. And that understand a couple things, you viewers and you young student athletes and parents. It's all about convenience with coaches, right? Coaches have thousands of highlight films on their desk as we speak. And it really comes down to the timeline when they're actually going to watch those films. But remember, they only have so much time in the day, and they're not going to spend all this time. If the first thing that they see on your film is something that's going to be like a long run and it's 10, 15 seconds long and all that, coaches want to get to the point right away. So when it comes to convenience, it's all about how you deliver it as well. Coach mentioned this earlier. He was talking about, how it's delivered, because a lot of times kids make the mistake of setting up their highlights and they have all the stuff that they want on there versus what a coach would want on there, right? To boost them up. Now I would just say this, for example, if you're a running back, which I was, I make sure and tell kids there's 3 aspects of a running back, and there's 3 things that should be on your highlight film right then and there that will really get coaches to really get them triggered and stay on your highlight film. And that's going to be running the ball. Of course, everybody runs the ball, catching the ball and what you can do out of the backfield, catching the ball, and then pass protection. So coach, he was talking about specifically about your positions and what you should be showing. So you just need to know specifically about, I know I'm kind of dancing her a little bit, but specifically for your position, you need to know what coaches want. If you don't know what a coach wants specifically, DM them. Coaches will tell you what they want to see in players. You can Google it as well. But highlights are all about triggering a coach's attention and getting clicks, right? It's with everything. But you're trying to get a trigger from them to get attention. That's what it's all about, is attention. You're a businessman now. You put your highlights out there. You want to get that coach to stop, and not only to stop, but stay on your film as long as possible. Coach made a really good point. He said up to 90 seconds, should be your film. Listen, I take it a step further and say, listen, 3 to 5 clips and not long clips, keeping it really short and sweet. Because if a coach within the first, I would say, 30 seconds or less of a clip, and they don't like it, boom, they go to the next guy. So you want to keep it simple. You want to keep it short and sweet. You want to highlight the most important things within your position that's going to get that coach to stay on that film. And it's important to have good highlights, because if a coach doesn't know you, you're trying to get that attention, right? You're trying to get them to know you on the field right away. So, and then on top of that, you have your emails and have all your information, athletic profile down the road. But your highlights have to be able to jump off the screen right then and there. And then also, one major thing with this that kids get wrong is updating the highlights and making sure that you're consistently updating your highlights, especially if it's during the season. Making sure to just constantly be on top of that, because you may have some even better clips on there that coaches want to see. Coaches will, even if they really know who you are, they'll ask you, do me a favor, can you add a little bit more. It's one thing that they definitely do. So let's go to the next thing. Let's talk about what to include in your highlights. We talked about that just a minute ago. But I kind of, we've been dancing around a little bit, but talk real quick about what should be in your highlights, Coach.
Okay, well, now obviously that's position dependent in terms of, obviously in sport dependent, what sport is, what position you play. But what should be included is number one, you want to show what you do well. So I'll give you an example. If you are a receiver and you are a speed guy, right, and you're on the outside, coaches want to see you beating people down the field, going deep. They want to see you showing off your speed. If you're a speed guy, you don't need to show possessions with you going across the middle in the slot, because that's not what you're going to be doing at the next level. All right. Now, however, if you're a slot guy, okay, and you make those tough catches across the middle, and that's what you're going to be doing in college, and you're not a speed guy, well, you need to show that in your film. So you need to kind of know what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and make sure that you emphasize your strengths. I'll give you an example from a basketball standpoint. If you're a guy who's a really good outside shooter, well, okay, coaches are recruiting you because they're recruiting you to come to their team to be a good shooter. So you need to show yourself making high volume of outside shots. You don't necessarily need to show yourself trying to dribble and trying to get to the basket and finish, because guess what? Those aren't things you're going to be doing at the next level. It's good that maybe you can do those things a little bit, but once you get to that next level, the coaches are recruiting you because of your ability to shoot the ball. And the fact of the matter is, it'll be plenty of guys at the next level that can dribble and pass better than you. So they're not going to be utilizing you for that. So make sure you know, as a student athlete, what your strengths are, because you need to really emphasize what your strengths are in that particular video. And then you talked about how to put together video and updating it. I think that's important because I think kids need to understand that once you put together a certain set of highlights, then say you put together highlights for the first third of the season, then you want to put together highlights for the second third of the season. You still want to have maybe your 2 or 3 really, really explosive highlights from that first third of the season and just add them to the highlights from that second third of the season. And also, when you're putting together the highlights, you want your best film, your best highlight first. All right, because that is what's called an attention grabber. So you want that first highlight first, and then you want another really, really explosive highlight second, and then you can get into the rest of the highlights. But you want, so for example, if you're a running back, like you mentioned, if you got a run where you broke 6 tackles and you get to the house, okay, bang, that's the one you need to show. If you're a linebacker and you tackled, you get a sack where, it's a 17-yard loss for the quarterback, bang, that's the highlight you need to show right away. Show your best, most explosive highlights right away. And keep in mind with a highlight film, and I don't think we kind of said this before, but your highlight film is an appetizer, right? Because what you want is the coach to see your highlight film and then ask you for full game film. Because no coach is just going to recruit you off of 3 or 4 highlights that they see or whatever. They're going to want to see full game film. So you want to make that highlight as enticing and as entertaining and enough so that the coach is like, oh, this kid's intriguing. Let me ask for a full game. Let me reach out to his coach. Let me start digging into him a little bit deeper. So just keep in mind, your highlight film is really your first impression you have with the coach. So it needs to be something that will stick in their mind, that will grab their attention, and that will keep their attention. And so that's a little bit as far as kind of how it should be comprised. And then also, you should have a really explosive highlight at the end. So at the beginning and the end, you need to have explosive highlights that really stand out. So you leave a beginning impression to make them want to watch. And then you want to have a highlight at the end that's explosive. So they're like, oh, so they remember you, like, hey, I remember this kid. Let me go back and reach out to his coach, or let me ask for more.
Yeah, a couple of things that I could add to that. What I would just say is, you mentioned this a little bit earlier, but young student athletes, they focus way too much on, the focus. They way too. What I mean by focus is all the different shapes and the zoom ins and all the
Right.
music and all the watch this little additions to. I was talking to JT Rogan. He shout out JT. He worked with Jim Harbaugh at Michigan and Stanford and a lot of different stops that Harbaugh was at. And he said that when they're looking at highlights, they put their headphones on and they're listening to other music and stuff. So and they don't really they don't want that stuff, because you remember when you click on Huddle, it sends you to an advertisement right away. And it's distracting, it's annoying, and all this stuff. So you want to make it as convenient as possible. It's not have all those distractions. Now, I do think what you mentioned this earlier. I think this is also important. It's okay, maybe if it's a clip that it's kind of, you're not sure if it's this O lineman or D lineman or whatever. I understand that makes sense. But you don't want to just go crazy over it, because it doesn't do you any good. And it's kind of distracting, and it gets in the way of moving forward with that. I would just say, with your highlights, it's 100%. It's exactly what you just mentioned. It's an appetizer. It's something that should really trigger these coaches and really say, hey, put you on the map too. So next thing is, and then by the way, also I would say at the beginning, they do give you this option, but make sure and have your first kind of clip. I would say if you want to stop these coaches right at the beginning, make sure and have your bio on there, have some contact information. And then also you can probably do that at the ending as well. So I think that's also something that's really, really good, because a coach, if all of a sudden it says, your offensive lineman on that bio page, 6'3", 280, and you run say like a 4'8", 40, a coach's eyebrows are going to come up and they're going to really want to watch your film. So moving forward, let's finish with the last point here. Let's talk about who to send these to, the highlights to, and where to send them. And I want to take to lead on this. So who to share the highlights to. We talked about this with your emails and any other information that you have that you're looking to send to a coach. I would just say, listen, go find a lower level position coach, a graduate assistant, player personnel, somebody within the anybody within the recruiting department, of course. But you're going to have a higher success rate when you do that. Now, I kind of go back and forth when it comes to the lower divisions, Division II and lower, to sending them to head coaches and coordinators and position coaches. I have talked to coaches in the past. They definitely say yes. definitely do that. But when you get to the highest levels, it makes it a little bit trickier because head coaches, they don't want to have anything other than to do with coaching and showing up when they have to when it comes to recruiting and being that guy to come in, shake the hand, give a good speech, and, kind of like a car sales, you know what I mean, to come in and give the finishing touches. And then also, when you're on Twitter, aka X, going and finding those coaches and then actually DMing those coaches and putting it on your DM. And then also pinning it on your timeline. So when coaches go on there, that's a huge thing. I always mention that. It's so important. And even on Instagram, you can still pin it on the top. Just not as many coaches use that as recruiting. But when you're on X, why do you pin it? Because right when they come on your page, it starts up and it goes. There's no advertisements. So if you click on the website, then it goes through the process of advertising and all that. So make sure and pin it on your timeline. And I just mentioned it, I guess, find those coaches, find their Twitters, aka X, aka Twitter, whatever. And then go and DM those coaches. You'll have a higher success rate.
Right. And that was a great point, the thing you brought up about, like, I think every film should have like an introduction almost, where you said have your name, your school, your height, your weight, your 40 time, whatever year it is, your school, whatever position you play, bang, that should come up initially at the beginning, and that should come up initially, and that should come up at the end. And it probably should have your phone number on there as well, just so that, again, if coaches see the film and they like what they see, they can then reach out to you. And like you mentioned, I think that was a great point about at the higher level. So at the Division I level, you might not even bother sending it to the head coach because he's not going to read it at all at the Division I level. Now, defensive coordinator, position coach, recruiting coordinator, grad assistant, video coordinator, all of those guys definitely relevant. Now, when you get to the Division II and Division III level, where there's less coaches on staff, less support staff, then it probably is good to just send it to the head coach as well, especially at the Division III level, where there, not a whole lot of full-time positions to begin with. You definitely want to send it to everybody on staff at those lower level, Division II, Division III, NAI. But at the Division I level, probably want to just stick to maybe recruiting coordinator, your position coach, the director of operations, maybe the video coordinator, and maybe a grad assistant. Because keep in mind, those lower level coaches, the grad assistants, the director of operations, the video coordinators, they are dying to look at film and find the next blue chip recruit, or to find somebody that people may not know about, because that's going to be their way to advance in the coaching world, is to by finding a prospect that no one knew about. So if they find you and they be like, oh, coach, this kid's good enough to play for us, and they end up, liking you and whatnot, now that coach gets a little bit more credibility from his recruiting acumen, excuse me. And so send it to those lower level coaches. And then another thing with film, just make sure that it's not too long. Make sure it's not too long, and make sure you leave a way to get in contact with you on the film, because obviously if the coaches like the film, you want them to be able to contact you. So, and then one final thing, please make sure that you do not send coaches film that is not like easily identifiable, because you don't know how many times I've gotten film where you could tell someone's taking it in the stands where their hand is shaking like this, and you hear people yelling crazy stuff in the background. Make sure the film is somewhat professionally put together. Now, I'm not saying go out and pay somebody to do it or whatever the case is, but just make sure that it's legitimate, because you don't want coaches to be looking at your film like, oh, I can't even tell who this is, or I can't even see what they're doing. And then they just turn the film off and throw it away, and you missed your opportunity. So whenever you get coaches' eyes on your film, that's your 3 minutes to shine. So you better take advantage of every single second of that, and don't waste any coach's time by having useless information on the film.
Yeah, that's a great point. And last thing that just came to my mind is what not to do. Definitely don't put practice or 7-on-7 film on there.
Yes.
Coaches are not coming back. They're out right then and there. So you want to make sure, and you want to have game film, capital letters, game film. Do not have anything that's other than that with your personal coach. Nobody cares about that. It's not important to them. And so that's what you should not do. Also, last thing that I will say before we land the plane, I would just say that always understand that coaches, they're recruiting 365 days a year. Unfortunately, on Huddle, there's no thing where you can't just see who's viewing it. A lot of times you can see the people are, constantly viewing it, but not who is viewing it. Coaches are looking at your information, looking at your highlights, looking at all that stuff. It's a 365, like I said, day a year position as a coach. They will be looking at your highlights. They'll be checking it out. There's just a timeline with coaches where they will put more time into recruiting than they actually, than you think they are. So just be patient in the process and understand that all of a sudden you might just get bombarded with 5, 6, 7 coaches that all of a sudden will come and, reach out. It's just everything's on a timeline, NCAA, NAIA, so on and so forth. So just be patient in the process, and you guys should be in good shape. So hopefully you guys take everything, these little tips that we're throwing at you, because this is coming straight from the horse's mouth. We've coached at the next level. And these are things that are definitely going to take you further than you possibly would, instead of just throwing it at the wall and hoping that it sticks. So, but listen, hey, let's land the plane there. Listen, Kelly College Consulting TX.com, right?
Yes.
.com.
Yep.
Walk on Warrior, walk-on Warrior here on YouTube. Make sure you subscribe on there as well. Listen, we got videos we're dropping every single week, full-length videos. And then we're also dropping a lot of clips on our good stuff. And then also Coach Kelly, if you guys are in Texas and that Midwest, you guys may see Coach Kelly in person. Definitely reach out to him on social media. He's always there to help. And listen, that's what we're all about here, is preparing you young student athletes for next level success. For me, Coach Z, and Coach Kelly, we'll see you guys on the next episode.